You're watching Bread and Roses, a weekly political social magazine that's broadcast in English and Persian via New Channel TV. Hello everyone, I'm Mariam Namazi.
And I'm Faribos Puya. In this week's program, we'll be discussing freedom of expression, internet, and the case of Raif Badawi. We'll interview Jimmy Wales, the founder of Wikipedia.
On Shocking News of the Week, we're going to be discussing the multiple attacks by Islamists, by ISIS in Kuwait, France, Kobani, and Tunisia. The insane fatwa of the week is from Saudi Arabia and how women look at football only to stare at men's thighs.
And the good news of the week is the spread of the movement to pardon those who are awaiting execution, as opposed to rise of execution by the Islamic regime in Iran.
For the question of the week, we're going to be discussing the issue of veil and racism. And we're also going to be celebrating Ramadan, and actually celebrating it and celebrating the fast defiers who are facing persecution as a result of not following compulsory Ramadan rules, and will be drinking wine to their health and their freedom. We also have a new segment, which is an urgent action alert, where we'll be raising important cases for your attention. Stay with us. Freedom of expression matters. It's not a luxury, a Western value, or up for sale. Sometimes, actually more often than not, it's all we have to speak truth to power. In fact, free expression is a demand of those without power vis-a-vis the powers that be. It's a cornerstone of other rights and freedoms, and becomes most significant and finds real meaning when it criticizes that which is taboo, forbidden, and sacred. When you're looking at the internet and freedom of expression, I mean, the reality is that it has opened up a whole world for a lot of people. It's given access to information, and it's also allowed people to express themselves in a way that they've never been able to before, particularly if they live under repressive regimes.
And people are learning from each other, easy to communicate instantly, and the access to information is amazing. At the tip of your finger, you can actually have, access to a lot of information. And that with itself has brought a level of freedom to find things out, be critical, and break the framework. And that's one of the things that repressive governments and institutions are not very fond of.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the reality of the internet, what it's done is it's brought opposition to repression in the public space in a way that wasn't able to before. And in a sense, you're seeing that a lot of the challenge to power and the norms that are imposed in societies being challenged right there on the internet, which is why you see so many governments trying to suppress it, censor it, and give very heavy sentences to people who've said very simple things on the internet.
I agree. And also one of the other features of this new age of freedom of information and internet is it actually brought the question of critical action from the margins to the mainstream, because if prior to internet you had to struggle for information, knowledge, and that was limited to the elite of the society or people who had the energy and the resources to be able to access that. Now that's made it open and made it actually cheap in financially. It's very easy to access that information, and a majority of people have the ability to access all of this information. So actually shift it from the margins, from the elite, the mainstream and the masses.
Definitely. And one of the things is, alongside this explosion in this freedom of information and expression, you see this sort of attempt to bring regulations, to try and control usage, to try to deny access to a lot of websites. And that's why you see in a lot of countries, like in Iran, for example, you have a huge number of cyber army, cyber police, and also the banning of websites and people having to access them via filters and through other means.
Yeah, I agree. And that bit itself has brought a lot of creativity. The communities who have been formed around internet to bypass those restrictions that exist. And that's a battle going on between population, people who want to be able to express themselves and improve a lot, against the states and repressive institution, and particularly religious groups and religious thought and religious police.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we're going to be doing now is interviewing Jimmy Wales from Wikipedia. He's the founder of Wikipedia, and I think the brilliance of Wikipedia is that it is the biggest free, non-profit sort of information center that exists, and that's why, you know, it's completely standing behind free expression in a way that many sort of commercial ventures like Google and Yahoo and so on are not. So you see them trying to restrict, censor, to allow governments to do what they want, whereas Wikipedia has stood firm with people like Raif Badawi and for free expression. Let's go and hear an interview now that we've done with him earlier. Stay with us. Thank you very much for joining us. I wanted to ask you about Wikipedia first, and the fact that it is this public, free mechanism for countless people to have access to information.
Yeah, I mean, today Wikipedia is viewed by over 500 million people every month, so it's one of the largest websites, and it's completely open and free and is written by ordinary people all over the world. We have editors in just about every country of the world, so it's a remarkable community effort.
The thing about, I suppose, I think what's so important about what you do is the fact that you do really stand up for free information. We know that Google, for example, has allowed certain censorships to take place as a result of requests from governments, but you've been really adamant against that. Why is that?
Well, we've taken a very strong view that access to information, particularly encyclopedic information, is a fundamental human right. It's a corollary of the freedom of expression. And for us to compromise with censors would really undermine our whole mission. And because we're a nonprofit organization, we're a charity, we have the ability to make decisions based on what's right for Wikipedia rather than on commercial judgments. So, so we've basically always taken a very strong position that we'll never cooperate with censorship.
I mean, what do you think about all these attempts at restricting and limiting the access to the internet?
Well, all around the world we see governments in various ways and in various stages working to restrict access to knowledge. Normally, the kinds of things that they're restrictive of is anything that threatens their current power base. But it's also other things, that are culturally sensitive and that sort of thing. I think I'm always an optimist, so I think that the internet is the greatest tool that we've ever had to eliminate this kind of censorship. And so I think the governments who are trying to ramp up censorship of the internet are on the wrong side of history, and will in fact not be successful at doing that.
So people like Raif Badawi and those who are being imprisoned, lashed, even executed for their free expression over the internet, they are basically heroes today.
Oh yeah. I mean, the people who are out there expressing themselves and then taking great risks to do so, and sometimes being punished in quite serious ways, are heroic people. They're people who really deserve our support, and we should always think about what is the best way that we can support them. One of the things in the case of Raif that I've been adamant about is putting pressure on the Saudi government directly by ordinary people like us who live in the UK or Europe or the US isn't likely to do much. They really don't care what the general public thinks in Europe or the US. But they do care about trade, and they do care about various kinds of support they get from Western governments. And those Western governments better listen to us, the people. And so for me, what we should be doing is putting enormous pressure on our own governments to say, you've got to stop doing business with the Saudis until they reform, and that's really, really critical.
And is that something that you'll be working on in your campaigning for freedom of expression?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's really important. I mean, one of the things we know from history is that we've had so much trouble when our governments turn a blind eye to human rights abuses in other places because, the old saying, well, he may be a dictator, but he's our dictator. That just blows up in your face, and it may take 10 years or 20 years, and suddenly you're part of the oppression, and this isn't where we should be. We should be leading by example. We should be really imposing sanctions, no matter how much money or oil a country has, to say this behavior is not acceptable, and we'll find a way without your oil.
And it would be great if you could just give a message to Raif and his family.
Well, to Raif and his family. Well, it's a great honor to even attempt to do that. He's become a great symbol for freedom, and so Raif, you're a hero to me and to a lot of other people. To the family, we support you, and we're going to do what we can to try and help.
Great, and also if you can give a message to the Saudi government as well.
And I call upon you now to release Raif immediately, allow him to leave the country, release all of the political prisoners that you have, and then more fundamentally and longer term, reform your policies. Be aware that merely speaking your mind is not a crime, and it's not something that you can punish people for. And be aware that there's a rising mood and a rising movement worldwide to put pressure on our governments and our businesses to stop doing business with you. It's going to really hurt you. So now's the time.
Shocking news of the week is the report on June 26th of multiple attacks by ISIS in Kuwait, in France, in Tunisia, as well as in Kobani, where more than 200 people have been killed in these various places and hundreds wounded. And it is both, I suppose, to mark the fact that this is 1 year since their Khalifa was established. That was also during Ramadan. And also to remind everyone that this is what they do. They're
soaked in blood. That's what it is. It's a fascist movement across, Europe and Middle East. My worry is that this becomes normal. I think there needs to be a level of outrage. It's not just, it's out there. I think people everywhere needs to be. The number of people actually they've killed in Kobani.
It's over 100 and 146 that we know of so far.
Absolutely. In total, they've actually beheaded somebody in Lyon in the gas factory. In Tunisia, they attacked a tourist. Innocent people, just gunned down people on the beach.
I think that's what they do. They actually kill indiscriminately. And I think what we need to do is for people to stop saying that they have justifications and legitimate grievances, because the reality is that it's a killing machine. This is how they maintain power. This is how they stay in power. And we've got many examples over many decades, from the Iranian regime to how the Saudi regime works, to how ISIS works, to how Al-Qaeda works. They all work like this. This is what they do. There's no excuses, no justifications. We need to stand up to them. It is a far-right fascist movement, as you said, and we really need people to come out in full force and saying enough is enough.
I agree, and I think that level of outrage needs to come out everywhere. No ifs, no buts, no matter what ISIS is doing, no matter where the Islamists, I think there needs to be outrage internationally.
I mean, unfortunately, though, there are going to be all of these left liberal sort of people, and I say that coming from the left
pro-Islamic
myself,
supporters.
who will say that they have, they've faced racism, or they've had terrible time, or they've got, they face discrimination.
No excuses.
What exactly? No excuses. Whether it's killing Shias in a mosque in Kuwait, whether it is killing a worker in Lyon, whether it is massacring tourists, it is not acceptable, full stop. And I think we really need to say this very, very clearly. The more outrage we show, the more difficult it will become for ISIS to kill indiscriminately. But we've got to, all of us, unite in opposition to them and to the religious right in general. The insane fatwa of the week is from Saudi Arabia. And it's about how women watch football because they want to stare at the footballer's thighs.
There's no competition, there's no football, there's no teamwork, there's no corruption in FIFA, there's no people coming together celebrating technique, organization.
It's thighs.
It's a sick mind of a mullah.
Mullah.
That's what it is. And interesting that the woman only, that's only woman, not sort of, so it's...
No. Well, the thing is that, first of all, it's, the fact that women are seen to be, just reproductive sort of organs. And so they're not allowed to look at men who are not married to them or who are, not forbidden to them. And they're not allowed to watch football in many places, like in Iran. Women can't go and watch. And now it's like, even when they do get to go, it's not because they're sports lovers, but because they're doing something, staring at someone's thighs. It's just so debasing to women.
Now, I mean, the interesting thing is that the women and people in Saudi Arabia, actually
have been making so much fun.
Have been making ridiculing this guy. And internationally, I think everywhere. I mean, you'll see a woman in Iran trying to break the doors of the public sort of space arenas to go and watch football. In Saudi Arabia, people making ridiculing these guys. Tide is turning.
Now, it's interesting because the thigh seems to be a very, very important aspect of fatwas. ISIS earlier we talked about had given a fatwa against women slapping their thighs. And now we've got this one. And, we're not supposed to slap our thighs. We're not allowed to look at men's thighs. Just don't go anywhere near thighs. It's dangerous.
Now, good news this week is from Iran. The growth of movement to pardon those condemned to be executed. Islamic regime of Iran, we know that not only they've been executing a lot of people in the last 6 months, hundreds of people have been executed, but try to incriminate families into the decision. The state condemn somebody to execution, and then they said, it's family's fault, and they get them involved. Now families started to pardon a lot of people in opposition to the capital punishment and system of retribution.
I think this
in Iran.
is a wonderful movement that is, this movement against executions in Iran, and this movement to sort of try to save as many lives as possible. And pardoning is one way, and it's quite an emotional sort of event that takes place because you've got people who are gathered, because they're public executions too, which are really horrendous. But you've got family members of the person being executed there. And, last minute sometimes you have the family of the aggrieved, saying, okay, I'll pardon this person. And the noose is taken off their neck. And it's such an emotional sort of statement as well.
And I think people are, because it's difficult to have organized against capital punishment in Iran, although a lot of people are doing, there's an international campaign going on. But this is a practical thing that people have started to do, and it's happening in different cities in Iran. And the jubilation or celebration following these pardons, it's amazing in different cities. So
Definitely.
I think it's such a welcome news.
I mean, it's welcome news. On the other hand, the Iranian regime has stepped up executions in Iran, and they are executing countless people. So, we do need to remember that, and remember that for every person that is being reunited with their loved ones, there are hundreds more that aren't. This week's question is from Salomia, who asks whether she's being racist when she criticizes child veiling. She did this on a feminist network and was attacked. And I think a lot of people do get this, where they criticize the veil, they question the veil, particularly when it comes to child veiling, which in my opinion is a form of child abuse. And, the feminists will say it's women's right to choose. It's got nothing to do with choice, particularly when it comes to a child. Also, you could say there's not much of a choice when it comes to adults either, but children in particular, it's a very clear-cut case, I think.
And I think you're right. What sort of happened to her, on the question that she's raised, she's gone to park, she's seen a whole family come in, a young children again, been covered head to toe, and she's questioning this. And, she hasn't actually gone and sort of intervened on the park. On a website of the feminists, women's rights sort of groups, she's gone and raised this issue. It's look, this is wrong, and she's faced barrage of insult, abuse, and I think that is something wrong here.
Definitely.
You know, women's right movement need to defend the right of women, and the fact that young girls have been covered from head to toe is fundamentally wrong.
Yeah, I mean, especially if we separate these things and focus on child veiling here, the fact that a child from the age of 6, 7, 8, depends on when she reaches puberty and maturity, they call it. She has to be veiled, she can even be married off, she has to be segregated. All of these are very serious issues of child welfare and well-being, and it's really important to be able to see it within that light. So I think, Salome, I think it's important to raise these issues. I think you should keep raising these issues. It's important to do that. And the truth is that questioning and defending the rights of the child has nothing to do with racism. Get over it, feminists. Start defending children and women instead.
Now, we want to mark Ramadan, which is an oppressive month for a lot of people in Islamic ridden societies where Islam is the rule, or the Islamists have a lot of power and influence. They force people not to eat. They say, look, this is the Islamic rule. But in solidarity with people who actually are suffering in the month of Ramadan, we did this last year, and we want this year again to raise a glass of wine and have some chocolate as well. Shall we do some chocolate?
Yes.
Some chocolate?
Reza, come on, have some chocolate.
Let's just give some chocolate to Reza Moradi, okay? And we want to sort of say, in solidarity with people in Iran, in Saudi Arabia, Tunisia,
Morocco,
in Europe as well,
Pakistan,
that who
everywhere.
actually are opposing Ramadan, and they don't want to be subject to harsh punishments. We want to do this.
Definitely.
Yeah. Cheers to everybody who is not fasting and actually breaking those rules.
Definitely. And I mean, these are real issues. I mean, it's not something that we're taking very lightly. If you look at just recent statistics and news, you've got in Iran, for example, just recently 164 people were arrested in 2 different cities for what's called Ruze Khari, which means eating during Ramadan or denying fasting rules. And you've got ISIS, who suspended 2 boys from morning till night, tied them up and hung them, suspended them for also breaking the Ramadan rules and eating when they weren't meant to. There's lots of examples of this, and there was a really shocking statistics I found on Iran. Last year, 207 Iranians were flogged publicly for not following Ramadan rules. Yeah. So these are very serious issues. But we've got to say hats off to people in Morocco, in Tunisia, that are doing this in a much more public way.
And in Tunisia, 300 people actually come out had publicly in the park. They've been sort of during the month of Ramadan. They've actually eaten food as a protest, and I think this is very important.
Oh, sorry, it's actually Algerian. Sorry,
so that's okay, no problem.
Algerians, yeah. This is what they did is 300 people came out in the northern region of Algeria for a public lunch to protest against what they say is persecution of people who refuse to observe religious fast.
And in Tunisia, they did that.
We've had that. Tunisia, Morocco, exactly.
And I think the other issue we need to point out is Islamic regime of Iran, Taliban, ISIS, Saudi Arabia, they have exactly the same rule. And I think this dark month of Ramadan we need to drink wine and make a public protest. And I think it's important
definitely.
to mark that.
People should be trying to eat publicly in solidarity with people who are facing persecution, for sure.
And what happened last year when you did this?
Last year when we did this, the Iranian regime called us corrupt and immoral, and yes, we are. Cheers. Now, in this section of the program, we want to raise some urgent action alerts for you. And these are cases which really need to be highlighted as much as possible. So we've decided to do that on a weekly basis. Now, we want to talk to you about a number of cases. There are children's rights activists as well as cartoonists who have been given really long-term prison sentences. And one of them is called Atena Faridani. She has been charged with 12 and a half years in prison for basically drawing a cartoon and showing her exhibitions in places where political prisoners and their families have come.
And she was critical of, in a cartoon, critical of the Majlis, or the Iranian Islamic Parliament, showing them as animals to protest against their policy against reproductive, women's reproductive system. And that's what they've done. They've actually imprisoned her. And the charge, they've charged her with national security. So actually any criticism of the Islamic government, it's against national security, and automatically you become enemy of the state, and you could be sent down to long-term sentences.
Yeah.
And this is outrageous.
And it's also, I mean, it's not just national security, there's multiple sentences, including, for example, being critical of, the supreme spiritual leader. All of these carry very heavy sentences. What's interesting too is that she shook the hand of her lawyer, and they were both charged with having illicit relations because of the handshake. And her lawyer has said, I mean, this is just part of normal social behavior, it's part of being polite. But again, shaking hands between men and women is considered it's considered forbidden, really.
Absolutely, and you could see, because they don't want anybody to criticize the government, they don't want anybody to question the oppressive, corrupt Islamic regime and the cronies that exist in the state apparatus, and they don't want anybody to criticize them. Hence, they find any excuse, even the lawyer. It's been charged.
Definitely. So what we'll do is at the bottom of the screen, we'll give you information about her case, her photo, as well as a place where you can go to take some action in her defense. Thank you for that. So now we've reached the end of our program, I think.
I hope you enjoyed the program this week. We are really glad to be able to actually answer some of the questions or the comments you made about that program. So do send us more questions or comment about the program. We really like you to be participating in shaping and forming our Bread and Roses.
And thank you for asking what happened to us last week. I'm sorry we didn't have a program last week. I wasn't feeling very well, but we'll try not to do that again. We'll try never to get sick again. And we want to remind you that we'd love for you to support us via the Patreon website. What's great is we have a few more patrons now, so thank you for that. Your names will be at the end of the program in the credits, but carry on telling people about us. And one of the things Reza Moradi was talking about, our director, is that we need help with distribution of our program. Yes, it's broadcast via satellite to Iran, to the region, and also people who have satellite dishes, let's say immigrants in Europe, will have access to our program. But the more help we can get in both telling people what channel we're on satellite, but also distributing our YouTube videos will be a great help. So thank you for that.
Cheers.
And we'll see you again next week. Same time, same place. Bye.
Goodbye.
Hi, I'm Mariam Namazi.
And I'm Fariborz Bospuya.
We're hosting a program called Bread and Roses. It's a weekly program that's broadcast in Persian and English in the Middle East and North Africa, primarily Iran as well. And it's also shown on YouTube internationally.
And we've been doing this since last May. We're coming up to our year's anniversary, and we've had quite a lot of fun making these videos.
We discuss taboo-breaking, free-thinking ideas. The Islamic regime of Iran has called us immoral and corrupt.
And that's why you need to support us. We are the alternative voice in Middle East and North Africa.
Of corruption and immorality. So do support us. Here's a short video from Patreon that explains how you can help us with even just $1 a week. That's nothing. Support us.
Patreon lets fans become patrons of their favorite artists and content creators. It's different than Kickstarter because it's not about one big project that requires lots of funding. It's more for bloggers or YouTubers or webcomics, anyone who creates on a regular basis. Here's how it works. When you become a patron, you're agreeing to give an artist a tip of an amount you set every time they release a piece of content, whether it's a new song, a video, or a recipe. You can set a monthly maximum to make sure that you're always within your budget. Choose an amount, enter your payment information, and you're done. Becoming a patron allows you to view and post in the artist's stream, and in exchange for your support, artists offer additional patron packages, which might include monthly Google Hangouts, music production tutorials, pre-sale concert tickets, or anything they can offer as a way to say thanks. Patreon, empowering a new generation of content creators.